Hi, this is Steve Worona, and you're listening to Campus Public Safety Online from the National Center for Campus Public Safety. Before I introduce today's speaker, here's a brief orientation to the Adobe Connect interface we're using. Your browser right now is showing the title slide for today's talk. On the left side of your screen, you'll see a box labeled Questions and Comments where you can read and type messages. And there's a tab labeled Everyone at the bottom of this box, and that's the tab you use for all of your general messages, including questions and comments for our speaker. We'll be breaking for questions several times during the presentation, so please do not hold your questions to the end. You can also send direct messages to a specific person by hovering your cursor over a name in the attendee list. And one of those names is Technical Help, and that's the place to go if you run into technical problems. We're also monitoring Twitter for your questions and comments. Use hashtag NCCPSwebinar. That's NCCPSwebinar, and you'll also see that on your screen. If you missed part of today's conversation, or if you want to see some or all of it again, this webinar is being recorded. The link will be available shortly after the webinar on the NCCPS Webinars webpage. And watch your email for a link to a brief evaluation survey requesting your reactions and comments on today's presentation. Please take a minute to respond to that survey when the link arrives. We do appreciate your feedback. And now for our presentation. Nearly 50 million fans attended college football games in the U.S. last year, and a lot of them enjoyed the fun and tradition of tailgating. Unfortunately, for too many of these fans, the fun took a wrong turn, leading to alcohol poisoning, violence, and vandalism. Campuses all over the country are struggling to deal with these problems, and today we're going to hear how the University of Missouri has developed a comprehensive program that has proven effective in encouraging responsible use of alcohol at home football games. Our speaker is Kim Dude, Associate Director of Student Life at Missouri, and Director of the Wellness Resource Center, which has been chosen as one of the top prevention programs in the country for 18 years by the Inter-Association Task Force on Alcohol and Other Substance Abuse. Kim has received numerous grants from, among others, the U.S. Department of Education, the NCAA, and the Missouri Foundation for Health. She has served on the U.S. Department of Education's National Safe and Drug-Free Schools Advisory Board, and has presented programs at the U.S. Department of Education Conference, the National Social Norms Conference, the NASPA Alcohol and Drug Conference, the Meeting of Minds Conference, and the National Bacchus Conference. Kim Dude, welcome to Campus Public Safety Online.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here and especially excited to talk to other people who are interested in this topic. I would like to start by giving you an overview, and I'm having a hard time advancing the slide.
Is that right?
Yes. Okay, there it goes. Okay. I'm going to give you an overview. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our campus so you can put things into perspective. I'm going to talk a little bit about the realities of prevention, and then the how and why we started our fan behavior efforts, the early challenges we had, some of our significant turning points, examples of our efforts, and then some of the lessons we have learned from that. Again,
and Kim, if your slide advancing isn't worked, why don't you give me cues and I'll advance them for you.
Okay. Okay. Next. Okay, I will tell you a little bit about our campus. Our campus is 35,000. We're the first land grant institution west of the Mississippi. We're in the middle of the state of Missouri. We have about 100,000 people in our city. We have a very strong athletic department. We have a very strong Greek system and a very strong alumni support. And all of those are relevant when we're talking about fan behavior. Yep, it's if you could advance it, please. This tells you a little bit about how much, or at least illustrates a little bit about the strong school spirit we have. I've had a lot of people visit our campus before and say that they've never been on a campus where they saw more people with school shirts on or shorts or whatever. I mean, everybody has them on, and it's just we have very, very strong school spirit, which I'm certainly proud of. Next, please. We also have a lot of strong traditions, and those traditions dealing with tailgating especially are traditions that you probably have on your campus as well. One is there's a strong tradition of alcohol being associated with tailgating. We also have people who go to elaborate lengths to decorate their tailgating area, and some people will buy very expensive vans and decorate them in black and gold and everything. I mean, they go all out. And then, of course, elaborate food that they have at tailgates, a lot of fun tailgating games. We have a lot of alumni support. There are alumni who spend lot of money to be able to get the prime tailgating spots close to our stadium. And then we have a lot of community support. I grew up in Columbia, and so I remember the days in when I was young that the town pretty much closes down when there's a football game because everybody is at the game. And so there's a lot of the football games have a major impact on our community as well. Next, please. It's important to understand that our tailgating occurs primarily in parking lots as far as being official, but unofficially, they're anywhere anybody can pitch a tent or sit down with a group of friends. Tailgating is pervasive throughout our entire campus, and we have a pretty large campus, and so it is literally everywhere you can possibly imagine, which makes dealing with it somewhat problematic. Next, please. Our problematic issues are this. First, high-risk drinking. The way I'm going to be telling you this story is starting back from about the late 90s, early 2000s, up until now, to give you a perspective of things. But especially high-risk drinking was significant, and I'll go into more detail about that later. But we also had excessive amount of littering of beer cans and beer bottles and liquor bottles and things, so that the next morning after a football game, if you were driving anywhere near campus, you would see trash everywhere. And that's problematic for a couple of ways. One, obviously, from a sustainability point of view, but also from an image point of view. What it made it look like was that an immense amount of drinking was going on and that was okay. And that becomes relevant later. We also would have a history of being rude to other fans from other schools, especially the schools that were our arch rivals. Like, for those of you who are familiar with Mizzou, KU is always our arch rival. And so we would have kind of a history of being fairly rude to our opposition. On any given football weekend, we will have thousands of fans. We could have 60 or 70,000 fans at the game, and a limited number of police. If we would call in campus, city, county police, highway patrol, so literally any police officer within about a 30-mile radius was working that weekend. But much of their time is spent on traffic issues. The traffic issues of the cars coming and finding places to park, but also an immense amount of pedestrian traffic when people are perhaps tailgated far away from campus and they're all walking in masses to the game. And so really most of the time the police were spending dealing with traffic-related issues. We always struggle to try to create a family-friendly environment because a lot of the people who came brought their kids. And so we had a combination of college students, older alums, Columbia people, and a lot of kids. And so that became a challenge. And then tailgating lasted for hours. I mean, if we had a 1 o'clock game, tailgating could start at 8 o'clock in the morning. But unfortunately, if we had a 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening game, tailgating would often start at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so people are sitting down, setting up a tailgating area and drinking for hours and hours before the game. And of course, that creates a problem as well. And tailgating continued during the game. So people would go into the game and come out of the game and drink some more and then go back into the game. And so that would take place. And that created a problem as well. Next, please. And so, but this is what Mizzou would do about it. First is we didn't allow alcohol in the games, technically. It's not sold except for the private boxes that are, for the very wealthy alumni who would purchase those areas. But for the rest of the people there, for the vast majority of people, you could not buy alcohol in stadium. And you weren't supposed to bring alcohol into stadium. I mean, people would check your bags and things like that, but we all know people are very creative in their ability to sneak alcohol in. But at least they made a valiant effort to try to keep alcohol from coming in. And then there was security. We have security in the stadium, both police and security, so that if people were creating problematic situations and the police found out about it, they would escort them out and perhaps arrest them. And then fans could text to the athletic department to say, there's problematic behavior down the row from me. Could somebody come and please take care of it, which is a good thing to do because that way there's not a confrontation from one fan to the other. You can basically be an active bystander and just say, hey, please come take care of this, and the police would. And then what I really liked was our coach before each game always gives a very nice message to the fans on our big Jumbotron that talks about the importance of sportsmanship and being safe and those kinds of things. So I always thought that was a good thing as well. Now, the next thing would be prevention facts. And you have to understand that I am talking to you not as a person who works for the athletic department, not as a person who works for alumni. I am a prevention specialist. I've been doing prevention for over 30 years. And so those are the lenses I'm looking at all of this through. So I'll start by saying that, and I show this slide every time I give a presentation on any topic, and that is that there is no silver bullet. Because frankly, if there was a silver bullet, I surely would have found it by now. There isn't one. There is also not just one right answer. It can't be the responsibility of one office. We can't say, hey, athletic department, solve this, or hey, alumni office, solve this, or hey, prevention office, solve this. It can't be done by just one office. And it also cannot be done just by one person. It has to be a mixture. And so, and I will get into that more in a minute. I also always show this slide. To me, what works is kind of like a three-legged stool. One leg is prevention. It's providing good education and good information. But one leg has to be policies. You have to have good policies, and those policies have to be well-known, and they have to be enforced. And then practices would include things like traditions, things you allow to continue to happen in spite of policies, in spite of prevention. And so if you have good practices, and you have good policies, and you have good prevention, then you have a system by which it can be strong and it can work. But if any of those three things are not strong, then that creates, that puts you into a very vulnerable situation in which things are likely not going to work as well. Now, to start the timeline, we have a campus community coalition called the Access to Alcohol Action Team, and that group has existed since 1999. And that is a coalition that's composed of all sorts of people from the campus and from the community, and we meet every month and we talk about alcohol-related issues. And as you might imagine, we spend our time talking often about the bar community, or we might talk about off-campus parties and those kind of problems, or Greek issues. But we also spend an awful lot of time talking about tailgating issues. And it got to the point where we were talking about it so much that we thought what we really need to do is create a separate task force that deals with it. Because not everybody who needed to be at the table was at the table of our access team. So back in 2006, we created a fan behavior task force. And I will tell you in a minute who was on that task force, but I want to start by telling you a very important story. I knew when I called this group together, they're all going to be going, why are we here? I don't get why. This is not a problem. We've been tailgating for years. What's the big deal? And I had gone to a conference of the U.S. Department of Education and had gone to a presentation from somebody I highly, highly respect, who many of you probably know, Connie Bain from Ohio State. And she showed a video from Ohio State of their tailgating. And the video showed behavior very similar to ours, where people were carrying around huge cases of beer, and there was an excessive amount of drinking going on and a lot of behavior being acted out that none of us would like. But we saw that on this video. And then the video would stop for a second, and then she explained that then the game had occurred. And this particular game, Ohio State had beaten Michigan. And so that's a huge rival. And so then at that point, the video picked up again, and it showed the behavior after the game. And after the game, they ultimately had a riot of so much celebration that cars were being turned over, businesses were having rocks thrown through their windows. I believe even a car was caught on fire. And it was very alarming. And I really respected the fact that Connie that was a pretty vulnerable thing to show. But she showed it and said, that's why we needed to do something. And I thought, I need a copy of that video. And so she luckily gave me a copy, and I showed it the very first thing at the very first meeting. And I said, there is nothing we are doing on this campus that is keeping this from happening to us. And so that helped get the conversation going. I also gave a copy of that to our director of athletics and to our chancellor, and that becomes relevant later. So we got together and we looked at issues very broadly. I did not go in there saying this is an alcohol problem. I went in there saying this is a safety problem, and this is a public relations problem for our campus. And so to hopefully decrease some of the resistance. It's very important to know that when you get a group of people together to talk about this topic, that you get the right people together. And so we had people from athletic department and obviously parking operations, since that's where most of your tailgate is probably happening, alumni relations because they are very powerful, News Bureau we had because of the public relations aspect of it, Greek life because a lot of Greek students are at these tailgates, our office plus a lot of the other offices, including, of course, police, are vitally important to be there. And so we got this group of people together, and I will tell you it was not easy. Not easy at all. Matter of fact, probably the hardest group I've ever had to work with because I had a very hard time getting them to, what I would say, get it, for them to understand what their role was, how significant the problem was, and why it was important to do something about it. Even though I had shown the video, I think there was this feeling of, oh, that'll never happen here. And so it took quite a while to get them to pay attention and to understand. And there were things that I had to do that are just kind of helpful hints. One is I knew I had to be prepared. This couldn't just be my opinion of what we should do. So I was able to show them data that we had from our students on their use of alcohol during tailgating. Then we had the police report out on their information, and so we had data. It was important to be flexible because even though I thought there were some things we could do, I knew that I couldn't do it alone, so I had to be flexible and listen to their opinions. Being patient is not my strong suit, but I had to be. Being persistent is my strong suit, and so I just kept plugging away meeting after meeting. We met monthly. And then it was really hard to be positive, but I did whatever I could to be positive, to help them understand that we really desperately need to do something in order to make a difference. And so some of the elements of successful coalitions, I think, are that first, everybody needs to have input from the beginning. It can't just be one person taking over. Everybody has to feel like they can give their opinion and it'll be valued. That everybody gets credit and that we're collaborating, not competing, although that is the hardest one of all of these. That there be a good, clear line of communications and that they feel empowered that they can have an opinion and that people will listen to it. And that we attempt to reach consensus. We don't always and haven't ever always reached consensus, but we at least made every effort to do so. And so I thought maybe I'd stop before I get too far and see if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Kim. And for all of you out there, if you do have questions or comments for our speaker, type them into that blank line at the bottom of the box on the left side of your screen that says questions and comments, and we will present them to Kim during some of the planned breaks we have during this hour. Kim, Steve from Rutgers wonders, what do you do to ensure that the tailgaters do not block the lanes between the parking rows? We here at Rutgers have an issue with just that, making it difficult for us, that is emergency services, to get down the rows, even with quads.
Yeah, we had that exact same problem, and we would, as you'll see later, we ride through our tailgating areas on golf carts that I'll show you in a minute, and we honestly, we and the police have to just remind people to move over, and then of course as soon as we do that, they move back to where they were. So I'm not saying that we have the solution to it, but it is a problem, especially for emergency vehicles. And so all I can say is we just have to, on an ongoing basis, try to get them to understand the importance of being able to do that, because they'll be right in the middle playing games mainly. They're, tossing the beanbag thing in the middle of the row. And so I don't have an answer for you other than to say that's a constant issue that we deal with as well.
And Kim, we know you're not part of public safety there, but someone wonders, do you have to deal with open or concealed carry and tailgating issues at your school? If you have comments, this is Joe Thornton, would appreciate hearing those comments.
If you're talking about weapons, and we have not had that issue, although I suppose there's nothing that's kept us from having that issue other than the fact that we've been lucky. We just haven't had that issue, so I don't feel really qualified to necessarily answer that. We certainly wouldn't. We have a law, a policy on our campus that you can't have any weapons on campus, certainly any guns or anything like that on campus. So if that were to be discovered, the police would do something about it because it's a campus policy that they can't have any kind of weapon.
Okay, thanks, Kim. And again, a reminder, if you have questions or comments during the course of the presentation, type them in there. We've got a couple more breaks planned. But in the meantime, Kim, I'll let you get back to your presentation.
Okay. All right. So Whoops, I missed one. Turning point is important. We had a pretty significant turning point, and I want to take a second to discuss this. If you remember, what I've said is I was having a hard time getting people to come up with very many ideas, and certainly nobody was coming up with any money to help us do anything. And so at the time, I realized that the NCAA had a choices grant, and if you're not familiar with that, if you just, I'm sure, Google NCAA choices grant, it'll pop up. And so the grant was a grant that usually is used for athletic departments where they use their athletes to be like peer educators. And I knew that would never happen at a campus our size. And so I asked them, I said, could I apply for the grant using sporting events as the educational venue? And they said yes. So I wrote a grant and that we could use tailgating as an educational venue, and I'll explain how we did that. The grant, you have to keep in mind, is not a huge grant. It's $15,000 the first year, then $10,000, then $5,000. And so I wrote the grant with the ideas that I'd gotten from the Fan Behavior Task Force and a lot of the ideas that I just had myself. And I sat down with our athletic director, and I said, because I had to have his signature on this grant in order to submit it. And he looked at me, and after I talked about what we wanted to do, and he is such a great man, his name is Mike Alden, such a great man that he literally looked at me and said, would it help your chances if I agreed to match your grant? And I mean, I literally thought I'd fall on the floor because that is such a tremendous amount of support. So that meant instead of a $15,000 year, I'd have a $30,000 the first year, and then instead of 10, I'd have 20 the second year. Instead of 5, I've had 10 on the third year. But more important than that, it showed a huge amount of support, and I knew would seal the deal as far as getting the grant, because the NCAA would look at that as saying, wow, you got that kind of support. Of course we're going to give you the money. So that was a huge turning point, because I no longer had to ask the Fan Behavior Committee for any money to do what we wanted to do. I could instead, let's talk about what we can do, as opposed to asking them for money, because they were very resistant, everybody, in giving me money. So that was one thing, and I'll talk more about that grant in a second. But the second thing is also significant. Because of those conversations with the athletic director, and because of his great leadership, and because of our chancellor, Brady Deaton, they're both really great leaders. And we had discussed a significant problem that we had. We had a particular area, tailgating area, about a half a block from our stadium, that was kind of an open, grassy area that had several trees around it, so it could also be kind of secluded, but it was away from any parking lot. And it had become known as Frat Pit, where I'm not exaggerating when I tell you there'll be 1,000 or 2,000 students there with cases and cases and cases of beer, and all sorts of negative things happening, including some sexual assaults. And we even got a phone call. I got a phone call from a mother on a Monday morning, a mother of a 16-year-old high school student, who said she'd been out of town over the weekend, and she got a call from the emergency room that her 16-year-old son was there in the emergency room because of alcohol poisoning, and he was found at this Frat Pit. So when I made that information known to, and of course the chancellor found out about it and the athletic director found out about it, they acted pretty swiftly and closed down that tailgating area, like literally barricaded it so that nobody could tailgate there at all. And I mean, the police had to be there hours and hours early to make sure nobody even started going in that area, because that was changing a major tradition that had been, that the students felt was their right to do. And so, as students typically do, they were creative enough to then go across the street the next several games to what was a pretty big parking lot at the time, and so they just moved Frat Pit across the street. Well, after a few games of that, and I mean, the police were just didn't know what to do. I mean, they were intimidated to even they couldn't drive in there because they couldn't get through, as the gentleman was asking. They couldn't get through anywhere. They couldn't drive anywhere. They went in there on horses, and that was an impossible situation. And they weren't about to go in there just walking in there, because it was a dangerous situation. And so, again, the chancellor and the athletic director said, okay, enough is enough, and they closed down that and turned it into a media lot where the only people who could park there were the media, and they, of course, weren't tailgating. Well, the students were very up in arms about that because, of course, we were taking away their right to tailgate, and so that took a couple of years to get that negative feeling to decrease. But the positive thing of that was that tremendous support from the top, that instead, I mean, the students are still tailgating, but they're pockets of students tailgating, like 20 here, 30 here, 10 here, as opposed to 2,000 all in one spot. And so those were two huge turning points. One was support to do our grant. The other one was support from the top that they would close down our problematic areas. And so our theme with the athletic department was that the mission was to create a positive identity among Mizzou fans, to have fun, safe environment, to model appropriate fan behavior, and to show the world what it means to be a Tiger. So this is how we wanted going about doing it. Our grant, we had to use the word choices in our marketing because it's the choices grant. So what we did is we called it We Are Mizzou, We Take Pride in Our Choices. And we focused on three areas. One was alcohol, one was littering, and one was sportsmanship. And the reason why the littering becomes important is because when people see all those cans and all those bottles, they assume everybody is drinking. So the perception in the eyes of people that they either see people drinking or they see the results of people drinking with the trash, their perception is that everybody is doing it. So we wanted to dispel that misperception. And then we also wanted to increase sportsmanship. So I'll show you how we do that in a second through our marketing. And then the second part of that is our fan behavior website. And that was for the purpose of educating students on how to have a safe tailgate, and I'll show you that in a minute. But for those of you who are not familiar with social norming, I'll do the very Cliff Note version of it. The premise behind social norming is that people tend to drink to the extent that they think their peers are drinking. But the problem is they way overestimate how much their peers are drinking. So they drink to keep up with this over-exaggerated peer group, this imaginary peer group. And so if you educate them as to what reality is, they'll still try to fit in, but they're going to fit into a safer reality. And so basically what you're doing is turning the volume up on the good behavior. So rather than emphasizing how bad everything is, you instead emphasize the good things that people are doing, and I'll show you how we went about doing that. So first we needed data. So we had been asking our students what they did during tailgating. So now we got permission from the athletic department to do a survey of ticket holders to find out what they did during tailgating. So then we were able to combine the results of both of those to create a social norms marketing campaign. And we did that through signs throughout the tailgating area, which I'll show you in a second, and like bathroom stalls, signs in bathroom stalls and on trash cans and things like that. And then we also would drive through the tailgating area showing, having giveaways and things like that. So I'll show you what those look like. So here are the examples of, we just bought literally about 25 or 30 sandwich boards and then made signs that had our logo, We Are Mizzou, we take pride in our choices, and then had data, like 70% of Mizzou tailgaters don't like excessive drinking at games. Well, if I am sitting there thinking about drinking at a game and I know that 70% of the people don't like it when people do that, well, I'm probably a little less likely to drink excessively. Or 92% of Mizzou tailgaters have a negative opinion of fans who yell profanities at games. Okay, well, maybe I'd be a little less likely to do that if I knew 92% of the fans don't like it. 87% of Mizzou tailgaters have negative opinion of fans who are rude to the opposing team. Or the most shocking one was that most MU football fans have 0 to 4 drinks while tailgating. I was even surprised at that because we asked how much they drink at games and found out that not only our students, but our tailgaters, the most of them do in fact drink 4 or fewer when they drink. Or that 89% of tailgaters have a negative opinion of people who litter at games. So I'm a lot less likely to litter if I know that people don't like it when I do that. And so then we would also do things like hand out T-shirts at events throughout the year so our students had those. We did that at our fall welcome event. So about 2,000 of our incoming freshmen got one of these T-shirts. Then this was an example of a sign that was on the trash cans that were throughout the tailgating area. And then our signs started getting a little bit nicer looking as the years went on. So, and we'd have to change them out each year because we'd have new data, and plus just the weather on the signs made it so we had to do the new ones each year. But the thing that I think this particular sign is relevant is that it shows that these are all the things people like to do more than drinking at a tailgate. So a tailgate isn't just about drinking. A tailgate's about visiting with friends. It's about going to the game. It's about being with family. It's about eating. It's about, the fun of barbecuing. But drinking also happens. It's just not the most important thing at the tailgate. So it's important that people realize that. And so we have, just some new opinions and new data as far as what they think of people who litter and people who are rude to the other team. So what it tries to do is change the culture, to change the norm, so that people start realizing, you know what, I want to be cool. I want to be like all the other tailgaters, and I want to have fun here. But this is how you go about doing that, is by making safer choices than what they may have imagined that they make. The first year we had enough money to buy an ad on our very large scoreboard. This is a view from outside the stadium, so people driving by were able to see this too. And we were able to have this up for several months during the football season, so it would come on every few minutes, but it was too expensive, so we could only do it our first year, but it was a nice opportunity. This is an example of our golf cart. We have two of these, Tiger Stripe golf cart, because we're the Missouri Tigers. And we drive around and we would distribute things like canned koozies or Nerf footballs or whatever, rally towels or whatever to tailgaters. And the reason that was especially good for me was I got to see firsthand what was going on in the tailgating areas. And so I really appreciated that opportunity. It wasn't just what I thought was happening. I got to actually see what is happening, and that I think helped a lot. And then to tell you a little bit about our tailgating website, we really tried to draw people to our website, and so most of our giveaways had our website on it, because this is where the education could come in. And so we'd have things that would draw them to it, like recipes, and we'd encourage them to give us recipes that we could put on there, various tailgating games and traditions, but also here are what the alcohol policies and laws are. Here's how to take care of an intoxicated person. Here's a blood alcohol chart, so you can determine what your estimated blood alcohol content might be. Here's why and where you can recycle. And then we'd also have things that would draw them in, like information for out-of-town fans on hotels and those kinds of things. And then we would hook up, of course, with the athletic department's website, so they could see what the stadium rules are and guest services and frequently asked questions and things like that. And then so at the end of the 3 years of that grant, here's what I would say our successes were. One is sustainability absolutely became the norm. They would be handed a recycling bag the second they drove into a parking lot, plus we would have them with us and we'd hand them out to people randomly. And it got to the point where most people said, well, I brought my own. It became the norm to do that, and the amount of littering just went down significantly. People were very, very good about being sustainable and just picking up their trash, and whether it was recyclable or not. And then there was also changes in policies. Through the task force, we were able to recommend things like, obviously, the closing of the problematic tailgating areas, but also certain areas were no longer, like there was a particular area that opened up that the students went to after that second place was closed down, and the university just immediately said, no, this is a parking-only tailgate area, you cannot tailgate at all here. And so they started, just like as soon as people started, if a large number of people went to a particular area to tailgate that was problematic, typically students, they would just right away close it down, so it didn't become a tradition at all. And then in some of the areas where they could restrict parking tailgating hours, they would. Some of the areas, because they park anywhere they can find a spot on campus, it's hard to regulate that, but in areas where there was a clear entrance and exit, they were able to restrict those hours. Now, this is the exciting part, the changes in behavior during those 3 years of the grant. There was a 47% decrease in the length of time students tailgated, so they didn't spend as much time tailgating. Like, they didn't get there quite as early as they used to. There was an 11% decrease in the number who tailgated longer than 4 hours. There was an 18% increase in the number of fans who drank 4 or fewer. So, in other words, more people were drinking less. That's kind of a confusing slide, but more people were drinking less. And then 73% decrease in the number of student ejections from the game itself and a 59% decrease in the number of non-student ejections from the game itself. And so now I will again take a break and see if people have questions for me.
And they do, Kim. Thanks. And a reminder for those of you who haven't yet typed in questions, do so. We've got one more question break after this one. But for now, Kim, someone from Boise State wonders, how effective is your text messaging system? How do you market it to your fans?
Well, we have these really cool signs, and you'll see one in a little bit, these cool signs that are put on the back of the bathroom stalls in the stadium. And then at the bottom, so it has our social normative messages on the top, and then on the bottom it tells them how to go about text messaging. And then at the game itself, they have like a ticker tape kind of messaging thing that tells people that they can use the text messaging service. And so I think the athletic department would probably tell you that it's quite effective. I think that people do use it, and so yes, I would say that it is effective, but you have to do kind of ongoing marketing. You can't just do it once and hope that they remember it. It's something you have to continue to market.
Dave from the Illinois Higher Education Center wonders, while you were out on the golf cart, did you use any brief motivational interviewing or interventions?
Well, it'd be nice if I could say that I actually had done that. It was more just interacting with fans, and most of the time, I mean, really the fans were so unbelievably polite and appreciative, especially when I was giving something for free. Of course, they're going to be excited about that. But they were always very nice, and sometimes they would, I guess the time I would come closest to that brief intervention would be if they questioned our data, for me to be able to have a conversation with them about the data and how that we're saying that not everybody does this, but this percentage of people do these positive things. And yes, you're going to have outliers, and you're going to have some people who don't make safe choices, but the vast majority of people are. So you can have that kind of interaction. But most of the time, people are not in the, they're celebrating and they're having fun and they're playing a game, and you happen to be driving by and they're all excited because they see this tiger stripe golf cart, and they can't believe you're giving them something for free. So it's not really much of an opportunity for the education is for me, really, to see what the atmosphere is really like.
Ezra Small, who I believe is sitting with a room full of people, asks, how does your campus administration reconcile the state laws and campus policy against underage use of alcohol with the obvious consumption by this same group on game days? Right.
That is a tremendous question, and that is something that the Fan Behavior Committee, and especially myself, that's very frustrating because, and it's a numbers thing. There's so many more of them than there are of the police that it's an impossible thing to get the police to deal with all of those issues. What I tell students is, you know what, if you just have a couple of beers and don't draw any attention to yourself, and you're safe, and you just have a couple of beers, and then you go on to the game, you're probably not going to get in any trouble with the police. The police are going to go after the people who are intoxicated, the people who draw attention to themselves. And when you're talking about 70,000 people versus 100 police, then the police have to go to what I guess you'd say is the low-hanging fruit, which are the people who are drawing attention to themselves. So do I like the fact that we have a significant number of people who on any given weekend could be breaking the law? No, that's not something I'm happy about, but it is the reality of it. So instead what I do is try to work toward trying to decrease the excessive use of alcohol, so that the safety concerns are really the focus rather than are they simply breaking the law or not. It's what I'm more concerned about. Are they intoxicated and causing problems to themselves or another person? That's the kind of stuff that we have to focus on because of the strict, simply the number. It's a numbers game between how many fans there are versus how many law enforcement there are.
Thanks, Kim. We do have some more questions, but I think we'll hold these for the last break so we can keep you on your timeline. So I'll let you get back to your talk.
Okay, and now we have some more turning points. First, as our NCAA grant ended, And so I was suddenly in a situation of we had this momentum started, and I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? And so I met with the athletic director. I shared with him all the things we had done. And again, I love this man. He said, you know what? I like what you're doing, so I'm going to continue to support you. So he continued to give us about $15,000 a year for the next several years after that to continue our efforts. Now, granted, we had to decrease our efforts somewhat because we went from having more than that, but we still were able to continue our effort. But the biggest thing that happened was we became members of the SEC. Now, we've been Big 12, now we're SEC. And that's huge for those of you who are familiar with the SEC. They take tailgating to a whole new level. They're almost like they're professionals at tailgating, and I'd heard all these stories about all these other schools, and so it was a little intimidating. So we thought, okay, we're going to have to do something to set ourselves apart and to be able to deal with this. And so what we did is we rebranded our whole effort. And this is the part where you're going to have to bear with me here, that I decided that what we needed to do was to brand ourselves as the best fans in America. Now, it's not like there was an award out there where we were recognized as being the best fans in America. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I just decided we're the best fans in America. And what I wanted to do was, I'm a strong believer that people either live up to your expectations or they live down to your expectations. So I thought, here we're starting into a new conference. And if we can say we have the best fans in America, then maybe this could catch on. Maybe people would actually live up to that. And so this is the kind of thing that we did to try to help that happen. We knew we had less money to buy the giveaway, so we concentrated on buttons and static stickers and those kinds of things. And the first year we went to like the hotels and the local bars and restaurants and some campus offices and some student events, and just left hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of buttons and things like that for fans to be able to pick up. And then we had, I love this logo. This is a logo that we had that became part of our signs, where it said, welcome to the zoo, because we're Mizzou. So welcome to the zoo is what we always say. So welcome to the zoo, home of the best fans in America, and with the SEC logo with our tailgating website on there. And then we had this particular static cling that we put in a lot of the businesses downtown because they were very interested in anything that said SEC on it. And so we had to go with the SEC part and then add in our best fans in America idea. And here's an example of one of those signs that went on the bathroom, and then the lower part talks about text messaging. I mean, one of the things that honestly happened in the midst of all this is our stadium was renovated, so all of the bathrooms were completely renovated, so all of our signs that were on the bathroom doors were all completely lost. So we had to spend money to create all new ones, which, as it turns out, it's okay because these are pretty cool looking. And we, again, tried to focus on lifting people up to this is what we want to be about. We want to be about being respectful to the other team. We want to be about being responsible ourselves and enjoying the game and cheering loudly and those kinds of things. And so again, we had our golf cart that we would ride around and hand out free stuff in. And the other thing that happened was, because we became members of SEC, the athletic department didn't want to send out surveys to their ticket holders anymore, at least for now, because there were so many other issues that were being dealt with. And so then we had to change it to just data on our students rather than the fans, the ticket holders as well, which we hope will eventually change. But for now, so we have information on what our students are doing or feeling. And so Mizzou Tigers, 90% of MU students do not approve of being rude to other fans, and that our students believe that visiting with friends and family and eating and going to the game are the most important things about the game day experience, not drinking. And that they also have a strong opinion about not littering. And this is what's fun, is the very first home SEC game was against Georgia. And so here's some quotes from some Georgia fans. This particular one said that everybody was saying, thanks for coming, because there was really an effort on trying to make SEC schools feel welcome. So he talks about, how, even though, of course, they beat us, that there was, that they were made to feel very welcome. And the next one, I think, is especially important because it that the hospitality was infectious and that they wish that other SEC schools would do this kind of thing. And it seems to me that it's the Missouri mantra, that if we could be more like Missouri-style hospitality in SEC, in fact, throughout college football. And so that was exactly what I wanted to have happen. And at first it was kind of a joke because people thought, well, Mizzou fans are being so friendly because they can't compete in the SEC. But as you might imagine, we have shown them since the last 2 years we were in the SEC championship game. So it wasn't just that we didn't think we could compete so that we had to be friendly, because that was the one thing we had going for us. Well, it was a lot more than that. We wanted to be friendly, we wanted to be welcoming, and we wanted to show how it could be done. And the new challenges were the budget was significantly smaller, so few promotional items were, just fewer promotional items. But an example of an inexpensive promotional item that we've used in the past and we're going to use again this year are the kind of fans that you have, like the old-time churches that weren't air-conditioned, those fans that they had. We had fans, one year we had fans that had our coach's picture on it. We had one that had a tiger paw, and then one that had the side picture of a football helmet. And so that kind of thing, like especially our first couple of games, are incredibly hot. And so we hand out these fans, and the students, and not students only, anybody just loved it as we were driving through the tailgating area handing these out. So they're inexpensive, but they have a point to them. The saddest thing is that our director of athletics and our chancellor both have retired in the last year. So this is another turning point that I'm not sure how it's going to end up, because the jury's still out, especially, I'm sure that these are both great men. I'm sure they're going to be great leaders, but I haven't had a chance to test the water yet on fan behavior, especially with the director of athletics yet. So I'm hopeful that will continue to get support. And the fact that the fan behavior survey is not continuing, I hope to be able to change his mind on that, or actually not change his mind, just change the athletic department's mind on that, so that we can potentially do that survey again, because I do think it's important to be able to have that information, not just from our students, but other folks as well. And then lessons learned. One is to not give up. It took several years of having fan behavior task force before we accomplished much of anything. I do think using positive messages through social norming works on all ages, not just college students. I think that the regular ticket holders thought it was pretty cool that we have such positive stats. And then working through a task force of representatives throughout campus, because you absolutely cannot possibly do it by yourself. Another lesson would be you must have policy and enforcement. Education alone is not sufficient. Shutting down those problematic tailgate areas was absolutely key to success. Don't be afraid to seek support from the top. I know a lot of people sometimes think, well, oh, they'll never say yes, they'll never say yes. But if I hadn't sat down with the athletic director and with the chancellor, a lot of this wouldn't have happened. And you just have to have the guts or gumption or nerve or whatever to just ask those important questions. And then certainly meeting with the athletic director to help them understand your desire to work as a team, because they can't view you as somebody who's trying to change tailgating so that tailgating's not fun anymore, because they want people coming to those games. And so it's not about decreasing fun. It's just about increasing safety and making sure that everybody's having fun, and not just the people who are getting really intoxicated, because they ruin other people's fun. So it's a question of trying to get everybody to work together to be able to ensure more safe and responsible tailgating. So now I'd be happy to answer some more questions.
Well, thanks, Kim, and we do have some questions, and we've got a fair amount of time, so if you have questions or comments for Kim, type them into that chat area. Michelle wonders, what department has actual oversight of the whole plan? Is it athletic, campus safety, alumni office, this task force?
Honestly, I have to say it's the task force. I would say as far as who's taking the most responsibility toward making it happen, it would probably be our office and police and athletics. But alumni played an important role in that, and really a lot of different offices play an important role. But as far as really rolling up the sleeves and making it happen, as far as a lot of the busy work, it's our office. But as far as the leadership and giving us the clout to be able to do what we want to do, it was a lot of these other offices as well.
And a follow-up, who was on the task force?
We had alumni, parking operations, which is really, really key to have parking there. Columbia Police, Campus Police, News Bureau, athletic, the Greek Life, and residential life is important. I mean, these poor residence hall coordinators, they have this high-rise residence hall and surrounded by tailgating, where these students on any other day during the year would get in trouble for doing the very behavior they're doing right now, but because there are so many people there, they get away with it. And the residence halls have to be locked so that because people come in and want to use the restrooms and could cause problems. So residential life is a key to this as well.
Do you have any recommendations for a university that does not yet have a significant tailgating problem but is looking to proactively prevent future problems as the program grows?
Well, if I was at a campus that was just starting tailgate, I would create family-friendly areas that where food is served and people can come and enjoy themselves and perhaps don't have the ability or the freedom to bring their own alcohol. It's just we were so far down the road that to make them alcohol-free that just wouldn't happen. And so if you're at the very beginning, set up rules and norms from the beginning that has ability to regulate that, or maybe you sell the alcohol so you have more control over who gets it. I mean, so you could card everybody and have more control over who is allowed to have the alcohol. I mean, those kinds of things would be things I would do if I was very first starting out.
Do you take the same steps at non-athletic events, such as concerts that are hosted in the stadium?
We don't, literally tailgating does not happen at any other time other than football games. It doesn't happen, certainly. I mean, we have basketball games and we have all different sporting events, and it just literally doesn't happen except at football games. And it doesn't happen at concerts.
A follow-up that came in while you were answering that perhaps you may have answered, building on that question, what are your tailgate operations during basketball games versus football games? We are a DIAAA institution and have experienced increased tailgating operations during our home basketball games.
We just don't. We have not had that problem, and at our basketball games, or really any a little bit at baseball, but not much. And so I think I think the same rules would apply with whether it's football or basketball or whatever, that you set up. So, especially if you're starting out, set up expectations and expect people to live up to them. And one of the differences is we'll have 60 or 70,000 people at a football game, whereas we're going to have, and I should know this, but I don't know, I would assume 7,000 or 8,000 at a basketball game. I mean, the difference is numbers. And so that, I think, has, and of course at a baseball game, it wouldn't be anywhere near that many. And so part of it is strictly numbers, and part of it is tradition.
Someone notes, we have issues with those that tailgate and don't attend the game. Do you have issues with this? And if so, how do you respond to them?
Yes, we have that problem too. Now we have a new rule with SEC is the no pass out rule. So what that means is once you go in the game, if you leave that game, you can't go back in the game unless you have a brand new ticket. So that has cut down on some of our people who would go back and forth during the game. So they don't do that anymore very much. And we have talked quite a bit about what do we have the police go through these tailgating areas and say, okay, you guys have to close this up because the game is going on. I mean, there's been quite a bit of discussion about what do we do with the areas where people don't even go to the games. And so that is an ongoing discussion that I think would be a relatively realistic thing to do because that number is going to be so much smaller than what it is before the game. And so I think that is a realistic thing where the police could, since they're not dealing with as many traffic issues at that moment, they could spend their time riding through those areas and trying to shut them down.
How do you deal with RVs on campus?
Where there's a couple of RV lots. Those are the ones that are unbelievably decorated. And I mean, those are hardcore tailgaters, and they have to pay quite a bit of money to park in these particular lots. And yeah, but honestly, when I'm driving through the thing in a golf cart, those RV areas are not the problem. They're like tailgate professionals, and they have TVs on their RVs and everything so that they can watch other games while they're waiting for our game to start. I mean, but they really aren't causing problems, and so it's more just interesting than it is problematic.
A question from today's headlines: have you had any problems with drones?
No. No, luckily we have not had that problem. That's not to say that we couldn't in the future, but I have no idea how we deal with that if that happened in the future. But I hope we don't have that problem. Yikes.
Do you think it would be? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said yikes. I hope that doesn't happen here.
Do you think it would be beneficial to partner with community members in close proximity, like owners of the field or parking lot where there were problems? How about having alcohol-safe licensees on the task force to discuss sales of alcohol? Alcohol sales licensees, sorry.
Well, I'm not sure I exactly understand the question. I know that when other teams come here, sometimes they'll rent out an area of our campus where they'll have a humongous tent, and then there'll be third-party licensees in there, and they'll have a catered tailgate. And then some of our like radio stations and things like that will have they'll have like a third-party vendor there, so we have some of that going on already, and those are typically not problematic areas. Those are pretty well controlled areas and very popular from a marketing point of view.
And because I garbled the question, let me clarify that last part. I think the point is, so for businesses that are licensed to sell alcohol in the area, having representatives from those businesses on the task force to discuss their sales of alcohol.
Okay. Well, the closest we come to that is that Campus Community Coalition, the Access to Alcohol Action Team, has bar owners on that task force. And then I have a yearly bar owner meeting, and part of that bar owner meeting, so those are the people that I think that person asking the question is talking about, are the people who own bars and restaurants, come to that annual bar owner meeting, and part of what we talk about are football games, because they will have elaborate functions at their bars before the game and after the game, and actually even during the game for people who don't have tickets. And so we do have to work very closely with those bar owners to make sure that, try to get them to be as safe as possible as well. And we put signs in the bars, and we have the buttons and those kinds of things to try to promote the Best Fans in America idea with them as well. But they are definitely they're not on the Fan Behavior Task Force, but they are on our other Campus Community Coalition, and then I meet with them on a pretty regular basis on a variety of issues, because in my job I have to deal with bar owners a lot, and so we talk with them very much about those kinds of things. So they take a little bit of they're kind of like an extended tailgate in a sense in their establishment, and so yes, they have very close ties with the athletic department too, because it's a win-win situation. The more people in town for a football game, the better off the bar owners are, because they make a whole lot of money off of it.
So we've only got a few seconds left. Let me squeeze in this one last question. What do you do for game day staff in the way of alcohol awareness training?
Actually, we have not had the opportunity to do that. The athletic department does their own training of, controlling the behavior of people in the stands, but having alcohol awareness training has not been part of their training.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks to all of our viewers and questioners from around the internet. Check the NCCPS Webinars webpage for a link to the recording of today's webinar, as well as a link to our speaker slides and information about our next webinar. And watch your email for that brief evaluation survey on today's session. We read and act on your comments. In addition to our Campus Public Safety online webinars, the National Center for Campus Public Safety lists a wide range of other events and resources. You'll find details on the web at nccpsafety.org. Again, that's nccpsafety.org. Campus Public Safety Online is brought to you by the National Center for Campus Public Safety with support from the University of Vermont Continuing and Distance Education and the U.S. Department of Justice. Special thanks today to Andrea Young and Dan Cardella. This is Steve Worona. Thanks for being with us for Campus Public Safety Online.